We all know how hugely anticipated Marvel's end credits scenes are. But what if the Harry Potter franchise had their own? Well, today, we're going through each movie and imagining end credit scenes for all 7 films. And some of these ideas are darker than you'd expect. Philosopher's Stone ends with Harry defeating Quirrell, pulling the stone from the Mirror of Erised, and Gryffindor winning the House Cup on Dumbledore's last-minute point bump. Term ends, Harry heads back to Privet Drive for a summer with the Dursleys, and the credits roll on a note of pure victory. The villain stopped. The school year saved, everyone's safe. Except, imagine they didn't roll straight to black. Imagine they cut to Malfoy Manor instead, where Lucius Malfoy is alone in his study, reading, not a spellbook, an article on Arthur Weasley's proposed Muggle Protection Act. Think about how small that trigger is. While Harry's been fighting off a professor with Voldemort growing out of the back of his skull, Lucius's biggest concern all along has been a piece of pending legislation. Sneering, he sets the article down and starts going through his desk. And what's in that desk isn't stationary. It's an array of cursed items, objects built to hurt, to curse, to corrupt. He finds one that makes him smile. Not a nice smile, a wicked one. "That should do it," he says. That's the whole scene. And it works because it names no object. If you've seen Chamber of Secrets, you already know exactly what "that should do it" turns out to mean. This is the entire setup for the next film's villain, delivered a full movie early without a single line of exposition. Just a man, a desk, and a decision already made. It's the wizarding version of a Muggle thriller opening on a boardroom villain making one quiet phone call. You don't need to hear the other end of the line to know something bad is coming. And you don't need to see the diary itself to know Lucius has just picked his weapon. Chamber of Secrets ends with the basilisk dead, Ginny saved, the diary destroyed, and Dobby freed via a filthy sock smuggled into Lucius Malfoy's hand. Term ends on a high note. The credits roll, and the audience walks away thinking the danger is fully resolved. Now picture the credits cutting instead to Azkaban on a stormy night. 2 guards are on duty when they hear something. A noise unsettling enough that they can't just ignore it and carry on their rounds. They approach, tense, and one of them barks, "Quiet!" the way you do when you're more scared than you're letting on. But the noise doesn't stop. It grows into a voice, repeating 3 words, over and over. "He's at Hogwarts. He's at Hogwarts." You don't need a name on screen to know this is Sirius Black, and you don't need dialogue to explain why it matters. A supposed mass murderer, fixated on the exact location of the one kid he'd need to get close to. It's the wizarding equivalent of a Muggle prison guard overhearing an inmate repeat an address in his sleep. The kind of detail that becomes an urban legend by morning. Here, it's just Tuesday in a prison that also houses actual Dementors. As a setup scene, it works completely differently from Lucius's. No plan revealed. No object described. Just obsession. And obsession is exactly what Prisoner of Azkaban runs on for 2 hours. Right up until the audience learns why Sirius wants Harry found so badly in the first place. Worth a quick aside here, because Chamber of Secrets technically already has an end credits gag, just not this kind. The real film's credits include a wizarding photo of Gilderoy Lockhart on the cover of his latest book, gormlessly asking, "Who am I?" Small, silly, and buried in scrolling text almost nobody sits through. Proof the film's flirted with this exact idea once and then just didn't commit to it the way modern franchises would. One popular fan theory would have used that credit slot differently anyway. Nearly headless Nick, off in some corner of the castle, chatting with fellow ghosts about his upcoming 100th Death Day party. No threat, no dread, just a background character getting 30 extra seconds to be himself. Which in a franchise this stacked with tragedy, might be the single most relaxing image on the whole list. Prisoner of Azkaban ends with Sirius escaping on Buckbeak, Pettigrew escaping in rat form after being exposed as the real traitor, and Harry gaining a godfather he can't actually live with, since Sirius still has to run. It's a rare Potter ending that isn't a clean win. The truth comes out, and it still isn't enough to fix anything. Now picture the credits cutting to Albania, deep in a forest, where a rat is scurrying through the undergrowth. Nothing remarkable about that on its own. The rat stops and changes. It becomes a man, tired, scruffy, relieved. This is Peter Pettigrew. And for the first time in years, he thinks he might be safe, alone, unwatched. He starts to relax into that feeling, the way you do the second you're finally off the clock. Right until a voice cuts through the trees. "Long time, Wormtail." Nervously, he turns and replies with one word that tells you everything. "Master." Let that sink in. 12 years after Godric's Hollow, and Voldemort isn't dead. He's in an Albanian forest with just enough of himself left to speak. This scene does the entire job of explaining why Goblet of Fire's villain has a body again by the end of that film. Wormtail found him, and Wormtail is about to become useful again in the worst possible way. 2 lines of dialogue, 1 transformation, 1 forest, and the next movie's entire engine is already running before the popcorn's finished. Fans have floated an alternate version that spoils even less while hitting just as hard. Picture Bertha Jorkins in an Albanian bar, filling out a ministry form about importing 3 dragons and a sphinx into Scotland ahead of a certain upcoming tournament. Dry, bureaucratic, forgettable, which is exactly why it works as misdirection. She tilts her head like she's heard something, gets up, heads towards the back near the restrooms, mutters that she must be hearing things, and turns to find Wormtail standing there. "Bertha, so long since I've seen you outside of class," he says. No thunderclap, no reveal, just a woman about to vanish from the story entirely and a rat-turned-man who's just found his next victim. Sound familiar? It's the exact same trick as the Azkaban guards from the previous film. Dread built from an ordinary setting and one wrong detail. A lighter fan pitch goes the other way entirely. Sirius and Buckbeak somewhere warm, reading up on the upcoming Quidditch World Cup between Bulgaria and Ireland. No dread at all. Just relief. Proof this list doesn't have to end every single film on a threat to work. Goblet of Fire ends with Voldemort resurrected in the graveyard, Cedric Diggory dead, Harry escaping by portkey with the body, and Fudge outright refusing to believe any of it happened. Terrified of what admitting the truth would mean for his own position, Dumbledore starts quietly rebuilding the Order of the Phoenix in response, and the film ends on dread rather than victory for the first time in the series. Goblet gets 2 credit scenes, because there's simply too much fallout for one to carry alone. The mid-credits scene drops us into the Ministry, where Fudge is bossing his underlings around, already laying groundwork for a smear campaign against Harry and Dumbledore, protecting his own reputation instead of the wizarding world, which tracks for exactly the kind of man he's been shown to be all film. One underling nervously asks how he plans to deal with someone as powerful as Dumbledore. Fudge sneers. "Get me Undersecretary Umbridge." That's the entire scene. No spell cast, no threat made, and it's one of the most menacing lines on this whole list. Because you already know exactly what Umbridge is capable of before she's shown up once. The end credits scene doubles down. Back in Azkaban, because apparently nowhere in this world is scarier over and over, a Death Eater approaches a cell holding a mysterious figure and asks if she feels it. She looks down at her arm. At the dark mark, active, burning, calling. She turns with a smile. Bellatrix Lestrange. Voldemort's return has just woken his most loyal follower from 12 years in prison. Together, these 2 scenes hand Order of the Phoenix its entire villain roster before the film even starts. Umbridge is coming for the school, and Bellatrix is coming for everyone else. And by the time the 5th film actually opens, the audience already knows exactly who to be afraid of and why. It's the exact same structure Marvel would popularize decades later. Quiet confirmation the real threat is stirring, right as everyone's reaching for their coats. Except here, it's not a superhero assembling a team. It's a Dark Lord reactivating his most dangerous follower with nothing but a tattoo. Order of the Phoenix ends with the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Sirius falling through the veil in front of Harry, and the Ministry finally forced to admit, in front of a room full of witnesses, that Voldemort is back. It's a costly win. The kind where the good guys are technically vindicated and still walk away having lost something they can't get back. Now picture the credits cutting to Malfoy Manor, where Bellatrix just collapsed to the ground, freshly tortured by Voldemort himself for a recent failure. Several Death Eaters have already been punished the same way, one after another. The wizarding equivalent of a performance review where the consequences involve the Cruciatus Curse instead of a stern email. One person is left standing untouched. Narcissa Malfoy. Voldemort turns to her and commands her to fetch her son. Her face goes pale with a very specific kind of horror, until Voldemort adds with a wicked smile, "Don't worry, I will not harm him. In fact, I have a special mission for him." Why does a promise of safety sound scarier than a threat here? Because we already know exactly what kind of special mission this family hands out, and a mother's relief at hearing her son won't be harmed only makes the line land harder. Fans have debated how much this actually spoils, since the films had already shown Draco brooding through Borgin and Burkes and the Hogwarts Express with something clearly weighing on him. Most viewers already suspected he was being pulled into something. What this scene adds isn't the twist, it's the certainty, confirmed in Voldemort's own voice, that whatever's coming for Draco is being handed to him personally and dressed up as an honor rather than a punishment. It sets Half-Blood Prince's entire Draco storyline in motion a full movie ahead of time, and turns every scene of him looking pale and distracted at Hogwarts into something the audience is already in on. Half-Blood Prince ends with Snape killing Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, revealing himself as the Half-Blood Prince, and Harry deciding not to return to Hogwarts at all for what would have been his final year. It's the darkest ending in the franchise up to that point, and it earns 2 credit scenes of its own. One for grief, one for plot. because a single scene couldn't carry both tones without one undercutting the other. The mid-credits scene stays quiet. We're on the Hogwarts Express, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione sit together in silence. Not comfortable silence. Grief. Harry looks out the window and watches Fawkes fly into the mountains, disappearing into the clouds. No dialogue, no swelling score, just Harry finally letting himself understand that Dumbledore is truly gone. It costs nothing to shoot. One bird, one window, 3 actors sitting still. And it does more emotional work than most franchises manage, with an entire extra scene and a full orchestra behind it. The end credits scene snaps back into plot. Mundungus Fletcher is quietly selling off a chunk of Sirius Black's old possessions, not asking too many questions about provenance. Because if there's one career Mundungus was clearly built for, it's running a slightly dodgy market stall. A ministry witch approaches, unimpressed, and commands him to hand everything over. Sorting through the pile, she spots a necklace and holds it up. Dolores Umbridge looks at it with obvious interest. Fans have genuinely argued over this one. One theory says it spoils too much. The later reveal that Umbridge has the locket only lands emotionally if the audience doesn't already know she has it. The counter theory says it's not really a spoiler at all, since the scene never confirms this is the actual Horcrux. Only that Umbridge likes shiny things and has questionable ethics about where they come from, which tracks for a woman who decorated her own office with plates of kittens. Either way, this single scene hands Deathly Hallows its entire opening platform, where the locket actually is, and who's about to make finding it very difficult for Harry, Ron, and Hermione. A muggle losing a piece of jewelry means an annoying trip to a pawn shop. A wizard losing one means a piece of the Dark Lord's soul sits in a bureaucrat's desk drawer for the better part of a year, and nobody notices. Deathly Hallows ends with the Battle of Hogwarts. Voldemort finally destroyed for good, and an epilogue set 19 years later at King's Cross, watching the next generation board the train for their own first year. It's the one film on this list that doesn't need to set up a sequel. This is the ending, the last stop. So its credits scene gets to be pure epilogue instead of a tease for what's coming. Picture the cut to Hogwarts, years later, where Headmistress McGonagall sits behind her desk, reading through the list of students joining her school for the new year. She's scanning names, business as usual, until she spots one, a Weasley, and 2 Potters. Her face goes horrified. "Maybe it's time to retire," she says quietly, to no one but herself. It lands precisely because it isn't dark. It's a joke, and a genuinely lovely piece of continuity, letting the woman who spent decades disciplining exactly this family's chaos clock what's about to hit her all over again, 1 generation later. One fan-suggested variation swaps the joke for something quieter, showing the boats crossing the lake with Albus, Rose, and Scorpius aboard, while up in the clock tower, Moaning Myrtle watches the tradition continue, joined by 2 other ghosts, Fred Weasley and Cedric Diggory, gliding up beside her to watch the new students arrive. All 3 smile. It's not canon, just a fan theory, but it takes 2 characters this story cost the audience emotionally and lets them witness something hopeful instead of just being memorialized. Proof this final entry could have gone either for the laugh or for the lump in your throat, and both versions genuinely work. Line all 7 up end to end, and the pattern's obvious. None of these scenes change a single plot point from the books or the films. What they do is turn the gap between movies into foreshadowing. A desk becomes a threat. A forest becomes a countdown. A necklace becomes a debate that's still running in comment sections over a decade later. The films chose to end clean every time. Credits straight to black, no stinger, no tease, no, the wizarding world will return. These imagined scenes aren't really a correction so much as an act of fan generosity. 30 extra seconds the saga never asked for, but clearly had room for anyway, using nothing but details the story already gave us. The wizards chose the clean cut. The fans chose the credits scene. And if imagining what the films left out got you this invested, you're going to want the next one. Because Hogwarts itself has rooms and passages the movies barely gave a second glance. Here are the 9 secret and forbidden locations in Hogwarts Castle explained.